impregnated the mother. And so it may be that these Syriac traditions about Thomas think that Joseph impregnated Mary, and God impregnated Mary, so that you had both Jesus and Thomas.
I'll be darned. Alex is that is totally new to me, and I'm very interested in that. Alex is in Rochester, New Hampshire, on Coast to Coast, first-time caller line. Alex, if everybody keeps their questions relatively short, we can get everybody in. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm interested in the conversation here. I don't claim to be an expert on theology, but I'm interested in the Akashic records. I didn't know if Dr. Bart Ehrman had heard of the Akashic records, specifically a book called The Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ, which was...
Bert?
Nope.
No. So what is it that you would want to recommend, Alex?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there's all kinds of different perspectives on Gospels and where they come from and different interpretations of different Gospels. I just thought that the Akashic records are supposedly like a way of reading directly what happened in the past. Like,
how old are these Akashic records? Well,
apparently they're kind of like spiritual in nature. And this man Levi, who wrote a book it was published in 1908. Called The Aquarian Gospel of Jesus Christ, transcribed from the Akashic records, was sort of like channeling or tapping into these sources, and could be this. I mean,
very, very interesting. Probably the source of a coast-to-coast show in the future. Let's get back to Jeff in Goldsboro, North Carolina, on Coast to Coast. Jeff?
Hi, Bart. Hi, Ian. Just down the road from you. We know that God is a Tar Heel because the sky is Carolina blue.
Yes, exactly.
Congrats to the Tar Heels for their championship, and they got a new class coming in. It's just as good. I highly recommend Bart's tapes for the teaching company. He's done an excellent job for those, so anybody who wants the tapes.
Sure, I've heard about that. Yeah.
My question is, the long ending in the book of Mark is not in our earliest and best manuscripts. So, Bart, when did the long ending come in, be inserted in the Bible? Why is it in our modern Bibles if it's not the earliest and best manuscripts? And how come it has bizarre stuff in it like venomous snakes and drinking poisonous liquids?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's surprising to people that the last 12 verses of Mark that are found in the English Bibles, where Jesus appears to his disciples after the resurrection, these verses were not originally in Mark. That Mark's gospel originally ended with the women going to the tomb on the third day, and they find a man there who tells them that Jesus has been raised, and they're to go tell the disciples that he's going to meet them in Galilee. And it says then that the women fled from the tomb and didn't tell anybody anything because they were afraid. And that's where the gospel ends. And so some scribes found that ending to be way too abrupt, and they added this ending with these final 12 verses where the disciples go to Galilee, they meet with Jesus, and Jesus tells them to make disciples, and that people who are baptized in his name will speak in foreign tongues, will handle deadly snakes, will drink poison, and it won't hurt them. These are the verses that are used by the Appalachian snake handler sect. Right. So the verses aren't in our earliest editions of Mark. We're not sure exactly when they were added, but probably by the 5th century or so, at least, they start showing up more commonly in Bibles, but they weren't in the earliest copies.
All I can say is I'd never care for those freeze frame endings anyway on a TV show. They just freeze frame. I don't know. It's never the same for me. Let's go to Steve in L.A. on Coast to Coast AM for Bart Ehrman. Steve?
Yes, thank you so much for taking my call. I just want to make a brief statement about why there's 4 Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all represent a portrait in words of the person of Christ. Matthew represented him mainly. The main thrust of his letter was focuses on him as king, hence his genealogy from Joseph,
right,
which would have been heir to the throne had Joseph been alive, and also all the dates around Caesar and all that stuff. And Mark
Steve, are you going to go through all four of the Gospels? Because you promised me you were going to make a brief statement, and that's going to be.
I've already done one already.
Yeah, I know, but it's going to turn into 2 or 3 minutes, so I just don't have that much time. Did you have a question for Bart?
Well, I guess if I'm not going to be able to say what I wanted to say, I would recommend to you, Ian, as well as your guest, the chronology of the Old
Steve,
Testament.
I just got to tell you, you got to read. Bart deals with everything you mentioned in the book, Jesus Interrupted. Everything you just mentioned or everything you were going to talk about, that's all in the book.
Right.
So, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, but I'm just saying instead, I mean, if you had a question, that would be great. I'd love to have the question. But if you're just going to go through all four of the Gospels for that type of a thing, you might be very curious to see how Bart talks about that in Jesus Interrupted, which I think, especially since you find that interesting, I think you would find that material there very compelling. And I hope you read it. I think you'll find it enjoyable and not at all what you think. In fact, Bart, I want to make a point to say about your final chapter. You hadn't really gotten into much of your personal story throughout the book until you get to the end, and then you talk a lot about your experience becoming an agnostic. But it was the way you talk about people that you are still close to who are still practicing in the faith. I just thought it was really sweet, and I liked it. I thought it was very sympathetic, and I thought I just had a great feeling from that last chapter, and I would challenge anybody like Steve to read that last chapter and to walk away feeling anything other than gratitude for the amount of conscientious work that you put into this book.
Well, thanks. I mean, the point of the last chapter is that it's still possible to be a believing Christian and accept the results of historical scholarship, because most of my friends in the field are themselves believing Christians. They simply don't have a fundamentalist understanding of what the Bible is.
And then I believe it's Marcel in Hot Springs, or is that Margell?
It's Margell.
Margell, thank you.
Yeah, it's a Jewish name. Hi.
I like it.
Both of you. Well, for me, I'm a Jewish believing person who believes in Jesus, but, I don't believe in a lot of things what the three Gospels say. I've been traveling kind of on this road for, 20 years, and I have come, and I had a radio show in Fort Smith here in Arkansas, and I'm saying what you're saying on the show today is just like right on like a lot of the issues. Like I was going to maybe publish a book that has like 400 plus contradictions in the scriptures, and my main emphasis when I talk to people on the street is the Gospel of John, because his theology mimics Judaism, which we believe. Like he doesn't have the virgin birth, where in John chapter 7, everybody knows where he's born from. And,
all right, well, hang on, Margell. Let's give it a chance for Bart to respond to that, because I don't know that you would agree that the Gospel of John mimics Judaism.
Well,
Bart?
John is very interesting because, as we were saying earlier, John has such anti-Jewish elements in it, where the Jews are the children of the devil. But on a kind of a more kind of on a lower level of John, a lower layer of John, there's a real concern for Judaism and for Jewish festivals, and there are 3 Passover feasts in John, and there's the Feast of the Tabernacles in John, and so at a very basic level, it is interested in important elements of Judaism, and I think it's because the people who are behind the community behind this gospel did start out as Jews in the synagogue, and they retained many aspects of their original worship.
Well, all in all, I would just say that before folks got too exercised about what they thought would be in the book or how they thought Bart Ehrman might be addressing it, to go read it. And I think you'll find it starts a great conversation, no matter whether you end up agreeing or not. And thank you, Bart, for all the time you gave us, and for misquoting Jesus, which is also a very interesting read. And I look forward to seeing what you come up with next.
Great. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
And I thank you, too. Do you still have a couple of weeks left in this semester?
We sure do.
Okay. Well, thank you especially then for doing that. I hope that doesn't put you behind the 8 ball on Monday morning. So Thank you so much. God bless you and have a great night.
All right. Thanks a lot.
It's been a wonderful evening, and thank you all for these very insightful questions and for the statements, and thank you too for not attacking Bart out of the box. Jesus Interrupted. Deus te amat, and I do too.